was extremely proud to previously serve this country as a field grade military officer and later as a Department of Defense civilian physician. I recently retired from the Defense Health Agency and have decided that I should now reveal information about a significant event that happened to me back in the year 1992. At the time, I was a major in the U.S. Air Force and serving as the Chief of Aerospace Medicine for the 45th Medical Group as part of the 45th Space Wing. We operated Patrick Air Force Base, the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, and the Eastern Space and Missile Center. We likewise operated control of the Eastern Missile Range, as well as supporting operations for multiple tenant organizations. These would include AFTAC, or the Air Force Technical Application Center, and the U-2 spy planes of the 9th Strategic Reconnaissance Wings that were stationed at Patrick at that time. We also supported NASA operations, both on the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station side and the Kennedy Space Center side. I usually assisted NASA space shuttle missions through the DDMS, or Department of Defense Manned Spaceflight Support Office. I similarly had the privilege of performing numerous air-sea rescues in the Atlantic Ocean aboard the HH-3 helicopters of the 41st Air Rescue Squadron and the HH-60 helicopters of the 301st Rescue Squadron. I was awarded 2 Sikorsky Rescue Awards, a Humanitarian Service Medal, and an Air Medal due to the joint efforts to support the people of South Africa after the devastation caused by Hurricane Andrew. I served as a rescue flight surgeon for the astronauts at Kennedy Space Center, or KSC, during more than 24 space shuttle missions. Then, with their subsequent landings at both Kennedy Space Center and at Edwards Air Force Base in California via the Support Operations Center at the Cape. Starting with my arrival to Patrick Air Force Base in 1989, I received specialized training from the Department of Defense, including the Air Force Space Operations Course and also the STS, or Shuttle Orbiter Familiarization Course, both held at Cape Canaveral Air Force Station. I was then certified as a NASA flight surgeon at Johnson Space Center, Texas. Similarly, I also supported NASA and Air Force launches of Titan, Atlas, and Delta unmanned missions operating from the Cape. There were additional duties I performed that are not suitable for discussion here. This period of my service to the U.S. Air Force and NASA included during the year 1992. I would like to specify that I assuredly believe that the universe was created by God, and that I feel all truths of our sciences unmistakably point to this being true. I believe that the so-called Big Bang and the moment in Genesis when God said, "Let there be light," each describe exactly the same event. As such, God has created an immensely complex universe that continues to unfold before our eyes. God has many mysteries that are far beyond our knowledge and current experience. We know from the Bible and other forms of Scripture that we humans are not His only creations. We as humans believe we are highly intelligent and have truly learned so much about this vast and magnificent creation. Nevertheless, there are far more truths that we do not comprehend than all that we do through science, even over just the last few hundred years. I fully believe that if we could somehow see ahead just 200 years into our own future, that the level of our human sciences available at that time would completely dwarf the level of physics and other sciences that we are so very proud to know today. We have much to learn about all of the things that God created, and that includes events related to our own meager existence before God put us on this planet. In other words, we humans are not nearly as smart as we think we are. There is far more within this universe that we do not know compared to what we fully understand in our times. With this said, I will address the experience I witnessed on Cape Canaveral Air Force Station in 1992. As best as I recall, the event was in the late spring of that year. What I witnessed was in no way expected, desired, nor selected by me. Instead, it was a matter of sheer happenstance from my viewpoint. Had I been given a choice, I would have chosen not to have been part of this experience. The sad truth is that it happened in a fashion that both surprised me and then made me quite angry afterwards. I had been to a facility on the Cape in my responsibility of oversight for some of the medical operations on the Cape in my role as the Chief of Aerospace Medicine for the 45th Space Wing. The functional contractor was EGNG, which stands for Edgerton, Germeshausen, and Greer Incorporated, which is a major national defense contractor. There were also a large number of other major DoD and space contracting organizations that I held a supporting role in dealing with, both on the Cape and over at Kennedy Space Center. On this particular day, I had just finished being shown a new function with one of our many Cape buildings, and my contractor guide had left as soon as we finished my introduction to the process. To enter or exit the bay, you had to wear a hair cap, lab coat, and non-electrostatic booties. As we egressed that bay, I was slower than my guide in doffing my gear, so I was a minute or two behind him. As I entered the hallway to get to the exit, the escort had left, but an unfamiliar major stopped me within this hallway. He told me he had something important that he wanted to show me. Having no idea what it might be, I accepted this invitation. I need to explain that I and my flight medicine team performed annual physicals and routine medical care for a large range of pilots, aircrew, many support personnel within flight organizations, air traffic controllers, combat air controllers, missile crews, AFTAC personnel, DDMS personnel, and even U.S. Navy personnel operating out at NO2, or the Naval Ordnance Test Unit, out at Port Canaveral Naval Station. We sometimes supported transient astronauts, visiting dignitaries, personnel who supported a unique State Department mission outside of U.S. territorial waters, and aerospace and other specialized functions. Because of this, the major knew me, even though I was unfamiliar with him for a good reason. As is often the case with doctors, patients recall visiting us far better than we recall their visit. I might see a fair number of sick call patients, 8 or 10 patients in a day, plus up to 8 flight or specialized physical patients in a single day. The patients would tend to run together for me for even a month's time. However, I certainly did not remember patients that I might have seen only once over the past year, or even once every other year. Still, since coming to the flight surgeon's office was so unique to those patients, they all expected that I would know who they were and what they were doing, despite the fact that we only had 2 flight surgeons who were present for all of the patient visits, for all of the personnel and units that I mentioned before. When this major approached me, he stated that he had something to show me that even I had never seen. And that was how he stated it. I have presumed since that time that he said this because I had security clearances to go to most of the facilities at Cape Canaveral, often requiring security escorts, while most workers only had their approved clearances to go to the specific buildings and locations where they personally worked. This idea was to maintain security compartmentalization. This would limit the risk of people from one functional area learning about key classified tasks performed in any other locations that they did not have the proper clearance, nor the actual need to know for that information. Because I sometimes traveled all over the Cape, I saw much more of our facilities and operations than did the common workers. This officer quickly directed me into a nearby office and locked the door behind us. There were louvered blinds on the windows looking out into the hall, and he closed these. He then commented that he was going to show me something that would knock my socks off. He sat down at a computer station and turned on the screen and the computer. When it came up, he took a minute or two to find the video he wanted. Then he had me sit down in his chair while he moved to the chair just beside me to my left. I had absolutely no idea what I was about to see and witness. On the screen, there came a video that appeared to be a closed-circuit television feed from a fairly typical flight hangar. There were no markings of any kind on this video. It did not show any kind of classification indicators, location indicators, time frame indicators for when the video was recorded, nor any type of other information on the display that was on the screen. However, what I saw on the screen was extremely unique to my experience. What I saw was a white, completely smooth vehicle that appeared to be a flying saucer. It was constructed in the shape of a modified circular egg, being equal in length and shape from all sides, as I would learn as I watched the video. Its contour was totally smooth with no light, flight control surface, pitot tubes, propulsion systems, antennae, or other projections that might be seen on any typical aircraft or spacecraft. While it was generally spherical, it was about 20 feet in length, I would guess. It had a type of beam or equatorial region, with about 60% of the craft being above this region and 40% of the craft being below this region. A shallow dome could be seen at its apex. It was completely white with no seams, rivets, or other clues to its construction. The only exceptions were a pair of vertical and horizontal black rectangles that had been painted, and I assumed these markings were to be used when evaluating a test vehicle because I had seen them on some of the test aircraft. The three vertical rectangles were only on the upper section of the vehicle, located at what I would call the 3 o'clock, 6 o'clock, and 9 o'clock positions. The four horizontal rectangles were along the beam or equatorial region, located at 12:30 to 2:30 position, 3:30 to 5:30 position, then from 6:30 to 8:30 position, then from 9:30 to 11:30 positions. Now, when I initially saw the vehicle, the camera angle was from somewhat above the vehicle, looking down on it from the 3 o'clock position. I only gained the rest of the information I just provided about the full range of rectangles only at the time that I witnessed it moving later on. I could partially make out information at the 12 o'clock position, but did not get a full view of it until it initially rotated in the clockwise direction. I am calling this the 12 o'clock position because that was the only section that had any sort of actual writing on it. As I saw it move, I was extremely surprised to see that just above the beam it said U.S. Air Force, and just above that was the flight insignia for U.S. aircraft, which is a blue circle with a white star on it, with red and white bars extending to the left and right of the blue margins. As I mentioned, there was a shallow blended dome to the apex of the vehicle, and here a pole extended straight up from the vertex of this dome. The pole was then attached to what appeared to be umbilical hoses that were twirled around each other, and these extended from above the vehicle and upward out of my sight. Alongside the vehicle, to the lower left of the screen, I initially saw two men who were in white lab coats. I presume these were engineers. To the right side, there were three technician-type people walking around in full-body suits similar to what I would refer to today as Tyvek suits. It was the comparison of the people to the craft that caused me to estimate that it was 20 feet in length. There was a warning sound that went off, and all of the people moved out of the way. While this was happening, I turned to the major to my left and asked, who would build a vehicle like that? He said he could not tell me. I then asked, why would we design a craft configured like that? His response was exactly what I'm going to show you right now. He went, we got it from them. pointing directly up, signaling, in my interpretation, that he was referring to space. All of a sudden, there were what appeared to be visual and auditory signs of electromagnetic discharges occurring around the vehicle. I will not describe this otherwise, because even though there were no indications of the craft being classified, the fact that it was a flying saucer made me immediately expect that this surely had to be a classified craft. As such, I do not wish to disclose any information that might indicate its method of operations, propulsion, or other characteristics that might still be used by it or by even more advanced craft within the current inventory of the United States. The craft rose from the concrete so smoothly that had I not been watching closely, I would not have recognized the motion. The picture you see is my poor attempt to show what it looked like. It then smoothly rotated one complete cycle going clockwise, then did the same rotation in the counterclockwise position. At the end of this, it was once more in the same position it had been in when it initially rose from the floor. It then moved to the right and left, then forward and backward, which I assumed was simply testing the controls for its motion. All of these actions seemed routine, noting that it was a flying saucer. However, what it did next surprised me greatly. The vehicle rose from the front of the craft, tilting to a 45-degree forward angle of attack, but absolutely maintained its stationary position over the floor from where it had risen. I gave an exclamation about this, and the major commented that he thought this would blow me away. Just then, there were knocks on the door and voices asking why the door was locked. The major immediately turned off the computer console and screen, then looked at me very seriously. He whispered, "Don't tell anyone I showed this to you." He then unlocked the door and 3 officers came in. One was a lieutenant colonel who again asked why the door had been shut and locked. The major stated that he had wanted to show me a skin lesion, so he had locked the door for the sake of his privacy. At this point, my mind was racing. If the video had shown any type of classified markings, I would have definitely had to reveal that I had been shown a classified video in an improper setting. But I also considered that someone had to have shown him this video, whether properly or not, or the major would not have known to look for it to even show me. If any of these officers had shown it to him, especially in an inappropriate manner, then they might also be guilty of this very same error. However, this was 1992, and for me to say that I had just seen a flying saucer video would have been a very huge deal. If I made any comment to these 4 men, I would then be required to report these men to their commander and to their chain of command. Then I would also be required to report this to our security personnel, not to mention those officers within my own chain of command. There would have been dozens of people involved, and it would have been an absolutely major issue. This seemed to me to be a career-deciding outcome. Quickly making my choice to avoid commenting on that odd video, therefore, I remarked that the major skin lesion was not cancerous and stated that I had to return to my clinic. I rapidly left that building and never returned throughout the rest of my time at Cape Canaveral. During my drive back to Patrick from the Cape, this was about a 30-minute drive, I was angered and concerned about what I had witnessed. I finally conclusively decided that I could not report this event to anyone due to the possible range of unknown repercussions I might receive as a consequence of making such a bizarre report. I think down through the years, we know of Air Force, Navy, and commercial pilots who have seen things and afterwards chosen not to file a report. Well, that's essentially what I was doing. Therefore, for more than 30 years, I kept silent about this entire adventure. Having had this experience, however, the later whistleblower videos and recent testimony before Congress in the last few years have captured my attention. Late in 2023, I decided to try something, so I requested from the commander of the Navy's Professional Development Symposium, or PDS, the permission to speak about the Navy's FA-18 videos of UAPs that they had captured on video during the lecture I was planning to provide for April of 2024. For several years in a row, I had given a series of specialized presentations to the PDS. I had previously spoken, for instance, about an introduction to Department of Defense explosive munitions, to orient medical personnel to how they work. I discussed the keys to monitoring and preventing the development of anemia in TNT and Tritonol production workers. I'd given a lecture on hazardous noise evaluation and abatement methods, and I'd even given a lecture about the recognition and treatment of worldwide entomology threats, or insect or vector-borne illnesses that would threaten our military personnel deploying to dangerous places around the entire planet. So these were what I had previously talked about. After a couple of emails back and forth, I was given permission to explicitly discuss UAPs during my April 2024 PDS lecture. The lecture was titled Human Factors in Identification of Aircraft, Military Drones, and Other Aerial Phenomena. Having sent a copy of my slide presentation to the PDS personnel, it was approved for me to deliver. To make certain there were no other conflicts, I sent my slide presentation to the public affairs officers at both Fort Sill, Oklahoma, and at the McAllister Army Ammunition Plant, where I worked at that time. I received approval from both sets of these officers. Therefore, I gave my presentation in April of 2024. For the final 15 minutes or so, I discussed the Navy's release of official footage of UAPs as recorded by naval aviators that included visual and auditory confirmation that FA-18 Super Hornet crews had witnessed, recorded, and reported the UAPs that they had intercepted. Then this evidence had been declassified by the Department of Defense and fully released to the public. In my lecture, I discussed my personal opinion that these vehicles exhibited flight characteristics that could not at all be duplicated by any human technology that I knew of from either the DoD or NASA. The presentation was very well received, and I even received a letter of congratulations for the presentation I gave that day. It was from the same commander of the PDS who had approved my presentation to begin with. With this in mind, now I have fully retired from the Governmental Defense Health Agency. I have decided to release this complete information about what I witnessed back in 1992. I have seen and heard the recent presentations given to members of Congress about UAPs. I recently have heard a number of members of Congress express their desire to hear more of the experience of any additional whistleblowers who would come forward. They have certainly encouraged any other Department of Defense employees to testify concerning their own information about UAPs. I've specifically heard testimony of whistleblowers who have firmly declared that the government has attempted to reverse engineer technology based on UAPs, especially last November. Therefore, I felt I could provide confirmation about these reports, and therefore I'm presenting my story. For one thing, someone had to design and manufacture the vehicle I saw on that video. Someone somewhere had to pay the research and the development costs of that vehicle. I believe this monetary expenditure should have been identified to Congress, since the Constitution declares that they hold the power of the purse over all military spending. While I do not know if that video was from Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, where I was at from the legendary Skunk Works out in California, from Area 51 out in Nevada, from the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Ohio, or from any other DoD location. The technology I witnessed that day was totally separate from anything I had ever seen before. First, there were no identified flight control surfaces or visible means of propulsion. For all of the aircraft I'd flown in and been a part of, this was highly unusual because that's how airplanes and helicopters fly. Second, it was able to maintain a tilted flight configuration while holding a stable 45-degree forward angle of attack. I have personally piloted both fixed-wing and rotary-wing aircraft, and none of them ever had the capability to maintain stability in the manner that this craft demonstrated. Thirdly, with the exception of the lecture I personally gave in April of 24, I do not know of any official explanations that have been given to the members of the Department of Defense discussing UAPs or vehicles such as I've described. I feel this is a huge mistake because I know exactly what I saw that day, and it was in no fashion a conventional flying vehicle. For other military members, when they see similar or other advanced technology, they deserve to be heard and listened to about the events that they have witnessed. I do not believe that Congress or the American public have officially received any approved description of any DoD or NASA aircraft or spacecraft that could perform as I saw on that day back in 1992. The recent revelation of a large number of governmental declassified reports and videos about UAPs have been the only source that even remotely resembled what I saw that day in 1992. Other whistleblowers who have learned about UAPs have given their testimony to Congress, so I am simply adding my voice to theirs in confirming their previous reports. As they have led the way by speaking out before me, I hope that my report may stimulate others to reveal whatever they have similarly witnessed. In conclusion, I absolutely resent being part of the events of that day. I had no desire to participate in those events. I had my entire career going on. I was working with astronauts. I was doing search and rescue missions. I was doing a lot of serious things, and the last thing I expected was to show up and see a video of a flying saucer being tested. I firmly believe that the craft I unsuspectingly observed that day was built by mankind, but doubtlessly was designed based on reverse engineering of some craft that had demonstrated capabilities that are beyond our traditional technology. I sincerely pray that all of mankind may see that we live on but a tiny speck of land and sea on a tiny blue planet within a great and fabulous universe. Moreover, we are not alone in this amazing universe. Realizing this, may we citizens of our world finally learn to treat our human neighbors with kindness and peace, for this is the only planet we possess. Our national and religious differences are far less than what we might share with extraterrestrial visitors who might already be amongst us. May God bless us all and bless the United States of America.